Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl. Welcome to our 2025 Best Picture Revisiting series.
Here are the 10 nominees for Best Motion Picture of the Year.
Honora.
The Brutalist.
A Complete Unknown.
Conclave.
Dune, Part 2.
Amelia Perez.
I'm Still Here.
Nickel Boys.
The Substance.
And Wicked.
And on today's episode, we'll be discussing I'm Still Here, which shocked with 3 Academy Award nominations. And we're joined by 2 very special guests, Jack and Antony from Oscar Film Forecast.
Welcome into the 4th episode of our Best Picture Revisiting series. And of course, welcome to all of our Brazilian fans now, because we're going to be talking about the hit of this Oscar season, Walter Salles' film, I'm Still Here, starring Fernanda Torres, the real, not breakout sensation of the season, because she's been here all along. But I'm so happy that we get to celebrate her this Oscar season this year. I'm Still Here, the big surprise of Oscar morning, the film that I think everyone on YouTube, at least, was shocked to see in the Best Picture lineup, but not like a negative shock. It was a very positive, good surprise to see that in the lineup. So I'm curious, you guys, what are your takes on this movie?
I was really shocked by how much I loved this film. I watched it about 2 weeks ago at this point, and I just found the whole thing like very moving, like this portrait of this family over time of how their life is kind of just shattered by the Brazilian dictatorship, and I just found in particular the it was like about the importance of remembering both like the people in your life who you lose, but also remembering moments in history so you don't forget either the people you lose or those moments in history so it's not repeated. I found the way that they incorporated the daughter's Super 8 camera footage throughout that of like kind of like a home video thing, like remembering all of those times with family members and times in history. I just found that very moving. Like you mentioned, Fernanda Torres, I think is one of my favorite performances of the year. I just found it she carries the entire film. It's like a total, I would say powerhouse, and it is in a way, but it's not the traditional kind of like powerhouse performance because it's more raw, it's more restrained. She is like keeping up this composure for her family the entire time. And there are those few moments, like at one of my favorite scenes in the entire film, like at the ice cream shop parlor, where you just see it crack and you see all of the vulnerability and just sadness that she's experiencing. So she does a great job. I found that children performances from the kid actors like incredible. I think a part of that is I think Salas very smartly I think shot the film chronologically, so that he was able to the kids were able to establish a relationship with the actor who played their father. I think his name is Selton Mello. So they're able to establish a relationship with him, and then once he leaves set, it's kind of like the same as in the film. He's no longer there. So, and also having them work with Fernanda Torres, I think also, of course, improved their performances. So great acting, great story. The final 20 minutes I thought were very emotional, really moved me. And yeah, I really loved it overall.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Jack said. I was fortunate enough to see a screening that followed with a Q&A with Salas and Torres, and it was a great way to understand the history that's involved with this. I think what's been so wonderful about connecting with this film with our community on our channel is hearing from a lot of people who were aware of this story and who are aware of this family and the value that they have. And I think it does such a great job. It's such a great testament to the importance of why this story matters, both in Brazilian history, but I think across the globe. You know, this is a sort of political dilemma that engulfs this family that I think just really roots it in the personal, because it really captures what it's like in this home. It's one of the, I think, the best examples of depicting a state of limbo that I can imagine in modern film. It really captures this feeling of not knowing what to do and yet trying to find closure with the lack of answers, finding closure with a comma rather than a period. And Dallas just evokes such incredible atmosphere by rooting you in this house, being able to, I think he does a great job of shooting the house in a way that makes you feel like you are part of it. The home videos is definitely a component of that atmosphere, but you know, it's seeing this house kind of disintegrate while the people within them, especially Torres, tries to rise above and withhold, you know, and contain their integrity. That incongruity, I think, was just captivating. And then I think that the ending does something that I don't think a lot of these biographical films do, which talks about how time matures our memories. and how what our relationship is to trauma as we grieve and as we move on. I found it to be in the end, I think why people are connecting to this is it's a very mature film. Maybe it's mature in a way that some American films don't tend to do. Maybe that's why The Brutalist is so unique this year because it's an American film that's like, wow, this is, usually not as ambiguous as a lot of European films and a lot of films from across the globe usually are. But those last 20 minutes I just found to be just quietly devastating because it really sinks in that this was not just an event that lasted this period of time. This was an event that lasted a lifetime for this family. And Torres, I think, just imbues every single moment of her performance with this feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing, but I need to keep going. And that perseverance, I think, is so identifiable. And she performs it with just no vein, and she's no voguing, no pretension. She's existing freely in this film, and it's truly a testament to feeling with film this year. So yeah, I think we're definitely cheering alongside Brazil for its I guess surprise nominations. It wasn't that much of a surprise though. We can talk about maybe the paths that led to it later in the episode.
Yeah, and to add to everything that everyone just said there, I think I'm Still Here's greatest strength is reflected into the real life support from the people of Brazil, because at its core, this film is about family. It's about togetherness. It's about community and the values that resonate so deeply with anyone who's watched this. I had the pleasure of seeing this the night before nominations, had this feeling, and then now rewatching again today ahead of this episode. And I particularly just love the first 30 to 40 minutes of this movie because essentially it's a vibe piece, and we feel like we're a part of this private family, and we celebrate the holidays. We see family photos, we dance, we joke, we love. And that's what, at least to me, makes Ruben's disappearance hit so hard, because if we didn't have all this time to really feel as if we're just another brother or another sister of this family here, the movie wouldn't connect as much. And this opening sequence just lets us be with the family just hits so hard for me, kind of something like you said there, Jack, in your thoughts, because this opening amplifies the emotional impact of the second half of the film, because we're so invested with Eunice's pain as she shields her family from the horrors and from the trauma. And it's one of my favorite things. We'll talk more about it when we get to Fernandez Torres, but the way that she holds herself and shields her family from the unspeakable is really, really, really effective inside this movie. And it's one that I'm very happy to see show up at the Oscars, even if it was expected or something that's completely out of the blue.
This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, going months and months back. I'm a huge fan of Walter Salles. I love his films, both Central Station and The Motorcycle Diaries, I think should have been nominated for Best Picture back in those years. And The Motorcycle Diaries came pretty close. It got an Oscar win for Best Original Song and a nomination for its screenplay. And I love both of those movies. I had really high hopes for this one. And just seeing that return of Walter Salles, him working with both Fernanda Montenegro and Fernanda Torres, made me feel like this was potentially going to be a huge player in the international race. So back in like June, July, I had this in predictions. I was thinking this could be huge. And then instead of sticking with it, I took it out when Venice hit. And that was a mistake, but I don't know how to learn a lesson from that. That said, I on a certain level, I don't love this the same way that I love The Motorcycle Diaries or Central Station. I love the aesthetic that Walter Salles approaches with. Dylan, you were saying that this film allows us to feel as though we are part of the family. And something that I really like that this is doing is it often allows the camera to take a subjective perspective, almost like we're looking through the eyes of one of the family members. And like we keep mentioning, that Super 8 footage, which is just such an effective tool to capture memory and show us the way that memories are replayed and replayed over the years, like Super 8 film on a projector. Honestly, I do think that I check out a little bit at the 40-minute mark or so. I think there's a certain point in it where it does start to go a little bit in circles. That is, of course, by design. Like we are saying, closure with a comma. It's never really over. I'm Still Here. That's the name of the film. It's about how time moves on and yet grief doesn't. And so I get the point. I get what it's doing. It doesn't always 100% land for me. But something that I will say that I love about this, the focus on joy. the focus on smiling through it. It's almost like happiness is an act of political resistance in this. And I think that's something that, especially in this modern era, I think everyone can learn from, that joy truly can be a small act of rebellion.
I agree completely, and I think that's why the scene when they're taking the photograph just I can epitomizes the movie so well, because
Hmm.
there's the resistance that Fernanda Torres' character has to have for the political oppression, but then there's the resistance she has to have because she still is the mother, she's still the
Hmm.
mom, and no matter whether her husband is coming back to her or not, those children are depending on her, probably even more so now because they've lost a parent. And navigating that, it's funny because Jack mentioned that it was shot in chronological order. I think a movie that would be really interesting to watch in uh, succession with this is E.T., which was another movie shot in chronological order, because they're both movies about, I really think, children understanding the darkness of our world. And the idea that the camera could almost be like another child, and you are that
Hmm.
child viewing this family, is, I think, what makes this so compelling. Because whether we've been through in certain cultures or societies where this sort of um, force is enacted on the social class, I do think we can relate to the idea of understanding that the world isn't full of these binaries. It's not full of easy answers. You could be in the car with your friends, and then some dark turn takes you, and that's what I think Salas is great at doing, is that he really roots you in what it would be like emotionally for you to be there beyond just the Wikipedia facts of what this historical event was like, and why, in a year where we're talking about authenticity and directors having respect for their subject matters, the fact that Salas says that he grew up, he went to this house, like he had that experience, I think shows you it's not that that means that he's the only person who can share it, but because he had that experience, that's why it mattered so much to get it right. And that's why he cared so much to make sure every shot was perfectly captured. And you feel that with the final product.
I also just want to add, if there was a prize for best soundtrack, this would be top of my list because just the compilation of 70s Brazilian music here, uh, spectacular. Song after song, every single scene is just underscored by something that had me wanting to add it to my Spotify playlist. So let's talk about the big question here. What was the path to getting here? This is a video that I don't think I expected ever to be recording because it just seemed like such a long shot, especially in a year where we have another international film eating up all of the air in the room. How are we here? So I have some theories on this, but I'm curious to hear what all of you guys think. What led us to this moment?
I mean, this seems like, I think I can speak for all of us, the biggest surprise in our history of following the awards season. As Matt's saying, this was something that maybe was on the radar all the way back before Venice, where those early reactions came out. Some were positive, there wasn't as many glowing ones, but the more people saw this film, the more the hype gained online. People have come up to bat for this movie and have made it seem, even when it's underperformed throughout awards season. And like we had the Golden Globes where it got into international feature and got into best lead actress in the drama category, but missed out on drama picture. But then Fernanda Torres gets up there, she wins, and it feels like from that moment on, this eruption of support for I'm Still Here has just kept gaining and gaining and gaining. And like, you can't go anywhere inside either the film space, the award space, any articles online, any YouTube videos, and all you have is people saying this is a movie that you need to check out because you're going to love it. And for the most part, those people who do go to check the movie out really love it. And in this era of Best Picture, the most important aspect of getting a nomination is number one votes. I'm Still Here is a film that's clearly showed it has a lot of number ones. And that leads me to believe is, in a season as crazy as this one, where we have new twists and turns every round, maybe this film is in that contention to potentially win with the weirdest Best Picture package of all time.
It's interesting because I hope people in the Academy are watching this movie. Like, I do think more people are watching it, of course, than they would have. But I still think it's the most underseen Best Picture nominee, and it's going to have to fight out of a hole to be like one of the top contenders. But I do think Jack and I both agree that I'm Still Here, especially with the Emilia Perez kerfuffle, it could end up winning the two other races handedly. It could end up being a surprise and international feature because it's one of the few times, if only times, where we have two Best Picture contenders in that category. It could be really exciting there. And I do think Fernanda Torres, number one votes are crucial. And she definitely will have a lot of number one votes. So, I mean, I'm just very excited, I think, for a unique year where Best Actress has so many Best Picture contenders, so many just movies that people are really paying attention to and leaning into. And I think I'm Still Here. I'm glad it's one of the ones that is in contention.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I agree with what Dylan said, the way that it got here was passion. I do think it was probably like 9 or 10 right there at the bottom, but I do think enough members saw it and had it like, I think the issue really was visibility. The people who see it, most of them end up really enjoying it. So I think the people who did see it, the nearly 10,000 Academy members and who end up voting, all of them I think had it at a pretty decent high enough spot that it still was able to get into Best Picture with those number one votes. And now I do think because it isn't Best Picture, if it was like just actress and international, it might not get as many people watching it, but I think most people try to watch at least all of the Best Picture nominees, I would hope. So I do think it will gain, let's hope, probably not. But yeah, I think more people will end up seeing it than ever imagined. And I do think it's hard to, because I feel like the fact that it getting that Best Picture nomination, now more people are going to watch it. Who knows if that same amount of people had watched it during the nomination period, it could have gotten adapted screenplay, it could have gotten a bunch of other stuff. So it's hard to gauge how much passion there will be by the time we come around to voting for wins, because I do think most people will see it, and I do think most people seem to enjoy it. I do think it's one of the more in this year full of like The Substance and Amelia Perez, I do think is one of the more traditional in a way Oscar films. It is a biopic. It's about a point in history. It's dramatic, all that stuff. So I think it's very strong, and I agree those two categories. International feature, I do think there's easily a world where it takes over Amelia Perez in that category. And actress, I'm a little less confident about, but I just feel like that's going to be a nail biter up until the end because we don't have any other precursors with Fernanda Torres and Demi Moore. I think will probably continue to win the remaining ones that we have, but it will still be up in the air that they haven't faced off against each other at all this entire award season. So it'll be interesting for sure.
Interesting counterpoint to this or comparison is 2021, the Best Actress race where we had Jessica Chastain with a surging Penelope Cruz at the very last minute in a film that was supported by Sony Pictures Classics that had very much a same last minute push. And I know I was predicting an upset for Penelope Cruz at the time. Didn't end up happening, but I do think it was probably closer than a lot of people would have expected, a sweeper versus someone who had no precursors to be. And I think the difference that we have here is that we now have that exact same Sony Pictures Classics last minute push that we've seen be successful many times in the past. The difference is this now is going to have a lot more visibility because of that Best Picture nomination. So I really see a possibility that Fernanda Torres can walk away with this award because people are going to watch the movie. They are going all out on a publicity blitz for it. And I just feel like her being fresh in the minds of voters is going to help push her, hopefully, to a win. It's just going to be really hard to say, though, because we have many awards in between now and the Oscars, and none of them include Fernanda Torres. So we have no way of judging the temperature. We have no way of checking where is the race really. So I think the best sign that we could have for a Fernanda Torres win would be if all of the awards coming up split between different performers. If we see a real consensus forming and Demi Moore wins everything from now until the Oscars, then it's probably just Demi Moore. But if we start to see it split and some of them go Madison, some of them go Moore, then I feel like we're barreling towards Torres.
Tá olhando o quê? O que vocês querem? Cadê meu marido? Vai embora! Sai daqui, vai embora! Sai!
So we've talked so much about this lead acting performance, so why don't we just dive full into it? Because I know the internet goes crazy for Fernanda Torres, but from the moment I first saw this performance before the Oscar nominations to now after the Oscar nominations, this is such a deserving performance of recognition. And I mean, I'll go as crazy as say is if Cynthia Erivo cannot win, because it's not looking very likely for her, this would be my pick among our nominees this year because Torres is just so phenomenal in the film, and we've talked about these scenes throughout this review so far, but those back-to-back moments in the middle of the film that really just break your heart. After finally finding this proof of her husband being forcefully removed from their house, she starts to celebrate. She's going to take the family out for some ice cream. She goes for a swim, and then a family friend comes to the house and delivers that heartbreaking news. And both times I've watched this, at the press screening and earlier today at the local cinema, everyone in that moment, you could feel the hearts drop, the tears start to water, and cries from everyone in unison. And I think the best part of Torres' performance is something that Jack mentioned earlier on. It's not this typical outwardly performance that's screaming or yelling or commanding your attention throughout. It's very reserved, it's very intimate, it's very small, and it's really, really, at least to me, perfectly done in these moments because she starts to tear up when she asks him to leave and not to walk him to the door, and then her daughter walks into the room and she has to immediately stop crying because this is my pain to hold. I don't want to give it to my children. They still have their innocence, they still have their positive outlook in life. I have to keep this inside. And then put that in tandem to the next sequence where she's cleaning her tears. Now they have to stay inside because they're at the ice cream parlor. She turns her head to the left. It's a full happy family. To the right, there's another one with everyone present. And while she looks at her table, she has her children who she loves and holds dear. Someone's missing. And those two moments back to back just tore me apart. But beyond those two scenes, I feel like Fernanda Torres delivers an intimate performance that doesn't scream for attention, as we know we've all talked about before, because there's no grandiose moments of shouting or commanding the spotlight, which we typically see in these awards conversation performances every year. But that's exactly what makes Fernanda Torres' performance so powerful inside of I'm Still Here, is despite the quietness, everything she does feels so communicated and it does so effectively. It's something that Jack's talked about multiple times throughout this recording, is she's acting with her eyes, her body mannerisms, and this is just like motherhood put to the screen. We've seen it in the absurdist angles of like Jennifer Lawrence in Mother, or in horror films like Toni Collette in Hereditary. And we've seen it in the overtly dramatic performances like Brie Larson in Room. But like this is a whole new angle of how to tackle that subject. And I feel like Fernanda Torres' performance, the screenplay, it all adds to this masterful work that I am very excited to hopefully see get more attention throughout the remainder of award season.
Less of a point for me on Torres. Just going back to something we've been talking about, the ensemble work is so strong. And of course, she is the core. She is the anchor of that whole ensemble. But really, scene after scene, I was just blown away by how real this family felt. I do think you can trace that all back to her performance, because without the work that she's putting in, if she doesn't feel like their mom, nothing works. But I was just blown away by how much she felt like a motherly figure here. She wasn't playing mom, she was their mother. As far as I'm concerned, all of those kids were her children. And there's just so many moments where you see that protective side of her coming out. The way that she shields, the way that she takes on that grief, as we keep talking about through this discussion. But really, the ensemble work, I think, is a testament to how well she is doing in her role. She ties it all together in such a beautiful way.
Totally. I think that what she does so well in playing a maternal figure is that she is a different mother to each one of her children. How she recalibrates her performance depending on which child she's acting against. And I think not only is that beautiful because that is what a great mother should be, it means that we got a better movie because that's what great acting should be. You should respond to the actor in front of you. You should not be acting. You should not be having a conversation like we are, as if, you're not talking to these individual people or that individual actor. And so I think that's what makes her so great, because you really see the understanding with her. And there's the old adage that acting is just reacting. She kind of embodies that beautifully. How many times is she just watching something, you see like the tears start to, encompass her eye, but she doesn't even want to let the tears drop because then it will reveal something to her kids, or she'll be outed to the government officials. There's back to the whole idea of containing it and not releasing it. So a total the idea that she like she's the captain of this ship. Like there are a few performances I think of this past year that you could look to as far as like this whole movie comes down to you, in the same way that I think Daniel Day-Lewis, a lot of his movies, like they come down to him. And it's great to see honestly a woman take that role. I feel like a lot of times movies aren't written in that way that give those female performances that level of responsibility. Yeah, but what I find interesting this year in particular is there was a lot of movies about duos, especially when it came to women. Like you look at Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, Cynthia Erivo, and Ariana Grande. And so that's what I find fascinating is I feel like we're in a great time where women are supporting other women. But at the same time, we see a more traditional role of a maternal figure still being given, I think, more nuance and substance, for lack of a better word. Then I feel like a lot of times is given. I feel like the mom figure a lot of times I feel like is written off. And if they're given, dignity, it's like they get that one scene, like Anjanou Ellis Taylor in King Richard. She get that one scene to tell Will Smith what's on her mind. Where this time the whole movie is that one scene, and I find that refreshing.
What I love so much about her performance, I say this term for some performances, is it's an ocular performance, in my opinion. I feel like so much of it is in the eyes more so than anything else. It kind of reminds me of like Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer is another example of like so much of it takes place in the eyes, where obviously she's putting up this front and composure for her family to keep them all together. But you can see in her eyes just like all of the devastation and the fact that she like she's lying to her family, but you can see through her body language and like I said, her eyes that she's really just going through it all as well. She is just it's a total tour de force. It's like also just a great representation of motherhood in general. I think mothers are like some of the most powerful people on the planet. And I think it's just great representation for that.
Why we're all
Um,
here.
yeah, exactly why we're all here. So yeah, I think she was just incredibly vulnerable and just a beautiful performance.
So this movie got picture with what we can all admit a very weird nomination package. Something that by the time picture rolled around, normally we would see a surprise like this coming. It would end up being in director or an adapted screenplay, but this didn't get any of that. And I really wonder how that didn't happen. Was all of the support for this movie from the acting branch? I'm not sure. But I know in a more sensical world, would have loved to see it get that director nomination, that adapted screenplay nomination. I do think that Walter Salles, being one of my favorite filmmakers, he has such an eye for atmosphere and especially just capturing real life. Something that he does so well in this movie is finding those down moments, finding the moments between the big scenes. It could be so easy to do a film like this and make it into a soap opera where everyone is yelling and screaming at each other all the time, where the tears are flowing through basically every scene. But he's too mature of a filmmaker to do that. He's not going to go for those big moments. In fact, I feel like if he had a choice, he would cut all the big moments altogether and just let you sit with Fernanda Torres through those small moments, those in-betweens. Like you were saying, Antony, she reacts differently to every single one of her children. And I think that also, as well as being part of her performance, I think that goes back to the direction too. How do you build a family and how do you create those dynamics between parent and child that each feels distinct and different from all of the others? Walter Salles does such a great job here. It's also worth noting he makes a really unique choice. Every single period in terms of time that this movie takes place in has a different shooting format to it. Going from the film that's being used in the 60s, 70s portion, as well as the Super 8 that we see sometimes there, to in the 90s, it's a little bit more of an updated film that we have. It's still film, but it's a little bit more updated. And then the final portion being digital in 2014. And all of that, I just feel like there's so much confidence coming from Walter Salles' direction here. It is the direction of someone who absolutely knows what they're doing, doesn't need to go for those big moments, is completely confident in the power of the story, in the power of the performances to hit that emotional power without having to cloy for it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that what it's funny you bring up like the idea that he's not like he's not over dramatizing this material. It kind of I'm currently doing my annual rewatch of Boyhood that I tend to rewatch always around this time, and he reminds me a lot of Linklater, where he makes the pedestrian picturesque, and he does the in between moments. You know, you look at a movie like Boyhood where you don't see the breakup scene, but you see the scene of him taking the photos off the wall, and that's kind of what this is like because I feel like what Salas understands is that you don't always know what are the moments, what are the memories of the childhood that are going to be remembered. And Torres is just trying to like, you know, stretch herself as many places as she can to make sure that her children have some semblance of normalcy in a world that is completely not normal. And that's where I think the restraint that he has throughout the movie is it builds to this, you know, very quiet crescendo. And he's not trying to hit you over the head like so many biographical films will, especially movies of this sort of political interest.
Yeah, I mean, on top of those snubs there before, Matt, you kind of mentioned this in the acting category, but I know we don't have the casting category yet. But if there was one, we would probably assume that I'm Still Here would probably miss that nomination. But as you mentioned, this cast is phenomenal from top to bottom because they really do feel like a family, as you talked about. But on top of that, when they have those moments by themselves, whether it's in relations with Fernanda Torres' character or anyone else throughout, they feel so real and feel so human. It's not like they are kind of something like Antony was talking about before, acting to the camera. They're acting to the other people inside the room. And if this film had gotten a little bit more traction earlier on, supporting actor is a category that is kind of stacked. But if we had room for someone else, Mello, who plays Ruben, I feel like is one of the reasons why we care so much about that character. Is he's so lovable, he's so charming, he has this radiate positive energy about himself. And if that character wasn't somebody you could become so attached to early on, a lot of this film wouldn't hit as hard as it does. It's the same thing that you can kind of say with Fernanda Torres too. Both these people are just so phenomenal inside their roles where you take them out, you put someone else in, does the movie still work overall?
Onde que o senhor vai todo lindo desse jeito, hein?
And now that's going to move us into my favorite portion of this Best Picture Revisiting series, where we get to hear our guest preferential ballot. And we have a little bit of a special thing today because the boys over at Oscar Film Forecast, they've done a preferential ballot video already before. So feel free to check that one out. It's going to be in the title cards above, as well as in the description if you want their full fleshed out thoughts. But we're going to kick it over to Antony first to get, you know, his more condensed version of his top 10 films in our Best Picture lineup.
On first viewing, I didn't loathe Amelia Perez in the way that I think a lot of people have. I did see it early, very early. I saw it in October at the New York Film Festival, so it was before a lot of the discourse. And so even though I didn't hate the film, I do think that when in this present moment, when you look at the 10 nominees, it is the one film that I feel like I would probably not nominate. I don't think it reaches the caliber that it should. So I'm putting Amelia Perez at 10 because I do think in the end it's not deserving of this stature. So that's my alley-oop way around that. My number 9, I'm sorry, it's Nickel Boys. Listen, I appreciate the film for taking a risk, but part of being a risk is that it might not work for everybody. It just didn't work for me. I felt that it took a very, I think it probably imagines itself as being very subjective because it puts itself in the eyes of these different point of views. I found it to be very objective and limiting to the people and the things that I could connect to within the film. So while I think it's a worthy film, and I think its subject matter, of course, is very prescient and important, I just dramatically, it was very distancing and very cold in that regard. So I'm sorry. It's number 9. Number 8, A Complete Unknown. I think it does a semi-job of explaining Bob Dylan. I still think that it's hard to explain a mystique, and that's where I think the movie kind of has some pitfalls. But I do think it's so endearing to this era, about Americana in this era and the transformation into the rock and roll phase of our culture. And I think the performances just have a lot of soul and texture to them. Number 7, Conclave. Well written, well acted, standard, sort of best picture material. I think Ralph Fiennes has a couple of great monologues about the value and the importance of faith and doubt and the relationship those two have. And it's a solidly entertaining film. 6, I would put I'm Still Here, for all the reasons we discussed. 5 is Anora. I think a tonal balancing act that I think just soars. The comedic moments just had me dying with laughter, but then the dramatic moments are just so tender and raw and vulnerable. What an ensemble cast, the true testament of what a well-balanced ensemble cast can do if we're not talking about it, I'm Still Here. Number four, The Brutalist. I think a very bold, it's a bold picture that I think really asks you to contemplate perspectives on life that you may not come prepared for. I think it is a stunning achievement as far as what it was able to convey in 3.5 hours. It is a soaring, really emotional, a depiction of the pitfalls of the American dream. Number three, Doom Part Two, a stunning science fiction extravaganza. Another film about faith, but also how faith can corrode the human spirit. Beautifully captured. I mean, the craft is undeniable, and just it's Denis Villeneuve at the top of his game. Number two is The Substance, one of the most exciting visions of this year. Coralie Fargier, however you pronounce it, she's wonderful. I probably would pick her for Best Director in my perfect world because I think this is just such a stunning announcement of a new creative voice. It reminds me a lot of Julia Ducournau in Titan. What it's saying about how we view ourselves, how we view beauty and relatability when it comes to engaging with ourselves and others in the world, I think is really exciting. And it's so much fun, this movie. And then, of course, number one, if you know me, if you know anything about me, I've been waiting for this movie since I was 8 years old, and I think it's a stunning adaptation, which is Wicked. I think two of the greatest performances, honestly, maybe that I've ever seen. I think that they join the pantheon of Julie Andrews and Liza Minnelli, Judy Garland, Barbara Streisand, that being Cynthia and Ariana. And I think it's a really beautiful, precise encapsulation of what it's like to see an other in yourself, how otherism exists in our world, and how it's rooted in the personal, and claiming your own independence in the wake of a lot of political turmoil. I mean, this is a story about a con man who says the way to bring people together is to give them a real good enemy. I think it has a lot of prescient themes for today, and the fact that it's able to have those themes in a fantastical setting, which fully luxuriates in these wonderful musical sequences, is just it's what American cinema is known for and will forever be known for. And so that is my list.
And that's what makes these Best Picture preferential ballots so fun, is this is now the fifth one that we've heard. We have had two look the same top to bottom. This is the highest that we've had Wicked, which I personally love to see, and it's the lowest that we've seen Anora so far. So let's send it over to Jack. How does your top 10 look?
I think, I don't know how it might be common. Number 10 is Emilia Perez for me as well. It just didn't really, I can respect a lot about it, like the creative swings and stuff. I just think there are lots of swing and misses rather than hits. I found it very disjointed in terms of the tone. I feel like with each subsequent scene, I like the movie and the tone and just the vibe of it changed. So it was hard to like get a grip on what kind of film I was watching. I did really like Zoe Saldana in it. That's definitely the saving grace. But number nine, not to yuck Antony's yum, is Wicked for me. I swear I do like musicals, even though those two musicals are my bottom two here. I really liked the first half of this film, when they were more fighting against each other. For some reason, once they become friends, it kind of loses a little momentum for me, and it gets a little, the pacing doesn't work as well. And obviously, like Antony said, the two lead performances are great. They carry the entire film. Part of what doesn't completely work for me either is some of it I think is a little too much of like the spending 5 minutes to decide the color of the yellow brick road doesn't completely like interest me. I like finding her broom, finding her hat, stuff like that, and also the whole cinematography stuff. Number eight, I have a complete unknown. I think James Mangold does a really good job establishing like this whole sense of this era and this community at this time, and I think all of the performances are great. I just do think with a person and a persona like Bob Dylan, who is more of like an enigma and more of a mystery, I don't know how much that kind of celebrity lends itself to a more traditional, straightforward biopic that this would be. I do think it lends itself more to like an I'm Not There that Todd Haynes made. So yeah, I think I found I had struggled I struggled connecting to it. I need to connect for films to completely work for me, and I feel like he was at a distance for most of the film. Number seven, Conclave. Similar to what Antony said, it's very well made. It's a good thriller. I found it to be a little predictable in terms of like once a certain character is introduced, in my opinion, it felt a little obvious who was going to end up being the Pope, so it didn't have quite the level of suspense and thrills that I would have really liked. And there's also the little twist at the end that I think was interesting and an interesting idea, but I feel like they didn't really explore it, which I had a little issue with, but still a fun watch, great performances, great ensemble. Number six, this is probably low compared to some people. I have The Brutalist. I really respect this film and like kind of like his architecture. Like I respect how well made it is and all of that. I just struggled to really completely connect with it. Connected with Toth as a character, and I really liked the first half of the film more so than the second half. I think the first half was like very well done. And I feel like in the second half it gets the metaphors and all the stuff Brady Corbet is trying to say. I feel like it a little more hitting you over the head with it that didn't quite jive with me as well as what was going on in the first half. So 5 for me is Dune Part 2. Really well made, probably easily the best blockbuster of the year. Number 4 for me is Anora. I just had a great time with it. I think it's a really fun time. It's really funny. I think it's probably Sean Baker's funniest film. Mikey Madison is great as the lead. A whole great ensemble, as everyone has been pointing out, with Yura Borisov, Mark Edelstein, Karen Kilgallian. Great ensemble. Just a fun time to watch. I think it's able to be both like loud and brash and funny, and also has these like quiet, intimate, moving moments that I think it straddles that line very well. Number 3 for me is The Substance. Just like when it comes to like original, probably the most original film of the year, just the whole concept, the whole creative vision of it is just so bold that I really loved it. Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, great performances. Number 2 for me, I have I'm Still Here. Just really, like I keep saying, emotion is hugely important for me when it comes to how much I like films. This is one of the obviously top 2 here that I emotionally connected to the most with Eunice and her journey and the whole family's journey. And then number 1, Nickel Boys. I think this is the film we are going to look back at in time, and it will be studied and taught in film classes. I think it really just revolutionized film and what film can be done with as a medium. And even beyond all the like technical achievements of the film, I just really connected with the 2 lead characters. I think the fact that the film and its whole conceit is through putting you in the actual like eyes and perspectives of the characters, like made me even more emotionally connected to them than if it was just like them sharing the screen. And the fact that it's about the Black American experience at this time period with 2 characters with such distinct, like different takes on what it is like to be a Black American at the time, with Elwood, I think, having a more optimistic point of view and Turner having a maybe more pessimistic point of view, and seeing how they both look at the world in different ways through their eyes, I found to be just such a beautiful experience. Very moving. Anjanelle Taylor is one of my favorite performances of the year. She deserved better. So yeah, Nickel Boys, my favorite film of the year and also my favorite of these 10.
Well, thank you both for sharing your top 10s. Of course, you guys recorded your own video on your channel. If you want to hear more, there is an hour and 11-minute long video that you can go and check out on Oscar Film Forecast. But with that said, where can we find you guys? What are you guys up to?
Yeah, we are over at Oscar Film Forecast. We have got our Critics' Choice predictions coming out soon, as well as everything going on with Emilia Perez, all of that stuff on YouTube. I'm at Oscar Film FC on Twitter and Letterboxd, and I think that is all of the social media I have.
I am at Antony_post on Letterboxd, and that's Antony with that an H, because my mom wanted to make it fun for me whenever I have to introduce myself to people, and I thank her for it. And then we're also on Oscar Buzz. We just started this week the Participatory Trophy podcast with some of our other friends, and it's basically an hour-long ramble of what's been in the week of pop culture, so you can follow us there. And yeah, just I thank you to Dylan and Matt for having us. It's been fantastic, and I think this season in particular, I think because we're dealing with a lot of craziness, a lot of scandal, but also I think in the end a lot of passion, whether you have the I'm Still Here fans, the Wicked fans, clearly we're here. I think it's wonderful to connect with these film communities. I mean, 5 years ago, I think we were talking about this. There was like, what, 2 shows that you could point to that were talking about awards in this way. And now there's, a plethora and so many wonderful fans who follow us. So thank you guys.
That's a wrap on episode 4 of our 2025 Best Picture Revisiting series. Here's the current combined leaderboard for both our guest and Matt and I's preferential ballot. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode where Ryan Castleman will be joining us to discuss Anora.